Hey crafters, and welcome to my channel, Crafters Autonomous. Make sure if you are new here that you hit the subscribe button down below to join my crafting community. As you saw from the title and the thumbnail of this video, we are going to be crocheting a border on a cross stitch, because obviously that's what every almost 20-something-year-old does, is crochet borders on cross stitches, right? But no, seriously, this is a project that I've needed to do for a long time. I started working on this when I was 10. So I finally finished the cross stitch itself about a year ago, but I needed to put it in a frame or hang it up. I didn't want to put it in a frame because that would mean going out and buying more materials. However, I had the great idea from one of my mom's wall hangings is that I could just crochet a cute lacy border on my cross stitch. So that is what I'm going to be showing you today. As far as materials go, you will need some kind of yarn to crochet the border with. You have a couple of options here. I'm actually using crochet thread. This is a size 10 weight crochet thread. So this is a little bit thick. It's not going to be as lacy as some other things might be, but I'm using this because I have enough of this and because I like the way that the color coordinates with the cross stitch. You could also opt for embroidery floss, and if you did that, I would recommend picking a color that you used within your cross stitch itself. If you do go the embroidery floss option, you can totally unthread it a little bit. So when you work on a cross stitch, usually you have the embroidery floss and then it tells you to use either 1-ply or 2-ply or 4-ply or something like that. So with the same idea, you could say use 2-ply, meaning you unravel it so you just have 2 of those strands that are wrapped around inside the embroidery floss. Here's to give you an idea of what I'm talking about. Each of those things that I've split in half, those would be 2-ply. So you can see there's all those little threads. So each of those single threads that make up the total embroidery floss, that tells you how many ply it is. The reason for going with, say, 2-ply or 4-ply instead of the normal 6-ply like embroidery floss would be to create a more lacy edge, and it will give it a tighter, more detailed look. I'm not going with embroidery floss, and that's mainly because I don't have enough on hand and a color that would match, so that's why I am going with the crochet thread. The crochet thread will end up a little chunkier, so just keep that in mind when you're deciding whether to use embroidery floss or crochet thread. Whichever you go with is not going to totally ruin your project, so that's some good news there. It will just change how thick or thin it is. Once you decide on what size thread or embroidery floss to use, you will obviously need a crochet hook because we are crocheting. I'm using this really old Susan Bates size 7 crochet hook with my size 10 crochet thread. Just like with normal crochet, changing the size of your hook that you use will change the tension of the project and how tight or loose and flowy your stitches are. I'm just opting with the size 7 and the size 10 crochet thread because I found that gave me good results, but you can totally play around with this. Now, having said all that, you might be like, well, what do I actually go with? Super great idea. What I would recommend and what I did before filming this video is I cut out a corner from here and I practiced crocheting along on it till I figured out what size and what pattern I wanted to do. So I would definitely, before you do your whole entire project and follow along and then realize, oh, I should have changed this or I should have changed that to get a different result, I recommend that you first follow this video with just a little scrap piece that you can practice on and test out the different sizes on, and then do your whole big project. However, I've already done the testing stage, so I am going to be working on the entire project, putting the border on here, and I will walk you through that process now. Before we ever start crocheting, we need to first figure out where we want our border to be. What I like to do is I like to just fold it down along one of these ribbings. So with the cross stitch fabric, it has all these ribbings, so I like to pick one and fold it across there and just kind of pinch it like that, get it even, and kind of see, is that where I want it to be? Do I want to go bigger with the border or not before I reach the crochet border? Once I get it to the size that I want it, I'm going to iron this down to create a nice crease. If you don't want to pull out your iron, you can also use a hair straightener, which is what I'm using. I've got it sitting on our hand crochet rug that we made in last week's TuTu. I'm going to make sure this is even and either iron or use a hair straightener to just iron down this side to keep it nice and creased. So now I have this distinct line where this fabric is going to fold over. I'm going to do the same on all 4 sides. You can obviously measure and count the number of rows, or you can just kind of eyeball it like I'm doing. I had already actually creased this and ironed this, so I know where I'm trying to fold. And one last side to fold over and iron. So once we finish this step, you should end up with your cross stitch, just a nice crisp rectangle. Now it's time to actually get out our crochet materials. I've got my thread here and my hook. I'm going to start by making a simple slip knot and sizing it down to my hook just like we start any other crochet project. And I'm going to come to about the middle of here. I like to start in the middle just because it gives you a little bit of time to get the feel for what you're doing versus starting near an edge or a corner. I think it just makes it smoother. So if I look here, I have all these little holes all along here. And I'm going to pick one, just kind of arbitrarily, and insert my hook through that hole. So when I go through this hole on the front, I'm going to also try to feed it through a hole on the back. I'm going to take a little bit of force and just push it through right there. Now because we are sending our crochet hook through that little spot, we are going to get a little bit of holes like this. We will have the crochet thread filling that in, but if you want to minimize how big those holes end up, you can use a smaller crochet hook. So I'm going to go right through there. And in this spot, I'm going to work a single crochet stitch. So yarn over, pull my loop through the cross stitch material. Just snag it there a little bit. So I've got my 2 loops on my hook, yarn over and pull through 2 to complete my single crochet stitch. Now because of the tension that I'm using, I'm going to work in every other of my cross stitch holes here. So I'm not going to go through there, but I'm going to go through this next one right here, insert my hook from front to back. Might take a little bit of force to get it through. Yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2. So I'm working in every other spot, working those single crochet stitches. And this is what I'm going to do all the way along the top until I get to the corner. I'm going to skip that spot there, go to my next one, insert my hook through, and then work a single crochet stitch in this spot. You do want to be aware of your tension because you don't want to do your stitches so tight that it's smaller than how much we're skipping, because then it'll kind of start puckering your cross stitch, but you also don't want to do it so loose that it looks sloppy and not crisp. Just going to work evenly down the side, so skipping every other hole and working a single crochet in every other hole along this edge of my cross stitch. I'm going to work to the corner and then I will show you how we handle the corners. I haven't quite reached the corner as you can see, but we do have a little issue it seems here, where we have this extra flap from the side that's also along here. You have a couple options. If you left this flap and didn't notch out that square, which I recommend doing it this way, what I would do is I would work through the front, the cross stitch itself, like we've been doing, and also through this back flap. Now obviously right now I don't really have enough to actually grab onto. But when I get there, I'm just going to work through my main cross stitch and this extra folded over flap. So I'll come through the front here, through the front, fold this down, and also come through here. Which again, those first few stitches are kind of hard to get in just because it's frayed a little bit at the edges. And I'm just going to work over both of those folds there. Again, skip a spot, come in that second one there. So my hook, I'm going to go through that whole entire thick fold. Might take a little force. Sometimes helps if you go through the front and then through the back, instead of trying to go through it all at once. Just going to keep working single crochet, much like we did along the top. And I'll keep working this until I get to the corner. Alright, so here I am in the corner. My very last stitch is going to go right in here. Go ahead and insert my hook through here and work that single crochet. Another trick, if you're having a hard time getting through, have a smaller crochet hook on hand. Send the smaller hook through the spot first, so it'll go through just a little bit easier. That'll make that hole a little bit bigger and you'll be able to get through more easily with your larger hook. And what I'm going to do in the corner is I'm just going to work 2 stitches in that same spot. How you treat the corner depends on what kind of pattern you're going to do. I'm going to show you how I'm going to build up the lacy border on this one today, but if you want to do a different pattern, it might change how you treat the corners. I'm going to work 2 in the same spot for today's project. Just give a little bit of extra slack to get around the side so it doesn't pucker. But because my next few rows are going to be thick and lacy, I don't need to have a whole bunch of extra stitches. So I work 2 in that same spot, and I'm going to work evenly down this side, just like I've been doing. I will skip the next spot and come in every other spot, working my crochet hook right through there, working single crochet, and I will work all the way around until I get back to where I started. So I have finished single crocheting around the edge of my cross stitch. All that's left to do is join. To join, I'm just going to work a slip stitch in the top of my very first stitch. So I'm going to find that first stitch, just work a slip stitch right in there. Now once you're at this point, it's really up to you how you finish your border. You can look up some different patterns and apply those and just work it all the way around. I'm going to show you how I'm going to finish mine off. Going to chain 1, work a single crochet in the same spot where I joined, and now it's time for our repeating pattern. I'm going to chain 2, and in my very next stitch, I'm going to single crochet. Chain 2, single crochet in my next stitch. Chain 2, single crochet in my next stitch. And I'm going to repeat this all the way around. This is going to create this little bumpy kind of lacy pattern here. That's going to give us the foundation for our next few rows to build up and create more of a lacy pattern. But just work 2 chains and then a single crochet all the way around. Here is our border now. Here's a closer look. And I'll mention that at any point that you're working on this border with this pattern I'm showing you, you can honestly stop at any step you want to if you like the way that it looks. So honestly, this will look super cute to stop here even. But I will keep going and show you the pattern. I'm not going to join like I normally do. I worked my last single crochet kind of in that join spot, just kind of in there, just fit it in there. And what I want to do is my very next loop, insert my hook, yarn over, and work a slip stitch right into that loop. Now it's time for our next repeating pattern. I'm going to chain 1, skip my next chain 2 space, find that second one, so not here but right there. Gonna work a double crochet in it, chain 1, double crochet in that same spot, chain 1, and work a third double crochet in this same spot, and then chain 1. To finish off our pattern, I'm going to skip this spot right here and work a slip stitch in the second one. So after the one I skip, I'm going to work a slip stitch in the next one. That's going to create this cute little bump here. I'm going to repeat that all again. So chain 1, skip the next chain 2 space, work a double crochet in the following chain 2 space, and then chain 1, work a second double crochet in the same spot, chain 1, work a third double crochet in this spot, chain 1. And then again, to finish it off, to fasten it down, I'm going to skip the next chain 2 space, so not skip right there, come into the second chain 2 space, and work a slip stitch. And I'm going to work this pattern all the way around. Something I will mention is that by doing this pattern, because we haven't counted anything, you won't necessarily end up with all your corners looking the same, meaning that you could have a bump situated here, your bump could be situated here, it could be bumps right there. So if you want to adjust it, then just play around with how many spaces you skip when you get near the corner to adjust it, or you can just keep working the pattern and let the corners turn out however they turn out. I'm going to just keep working this and let the corners turn out however they turn out. So here you can see it's just working out that our bump's kind of sitting along the top, kind of, not really on the side. I'm totally cool with that. So I'm just going to keep working this pattern all the way around, and when I'm done I'll show you some of the ways that the corners may fall. I'll show you how they fall on mine. And this is because we didn't bother to count anything, because it'd be hard to fold this exactly right, so that way our corners would end up a certain way with the pattern. But if you did want to adjust this, you could just skip extra chain 2 spaces or do less chain 2 spaces to kind of move it forward or back. So here is this third row of the border. I've come most of the way around. I've got a little bit more space here. Now we have a bit of a situation. Now you may get really lucky that it just so happened that the number of single crochet stitches we did in the very beginning worked out, so that way you're able to fit exactly one more iteration of our pattern in here. But more likely than not, you're gonna find yourself where either you can't quite fit one more, or you could fit one more and then some. So if it doesn't fit exactly, we want to just kind of fit it in the middle to fill in this last little section. So I'm going to start with my chain 1. Normally I would skip 1 and go right in here, but then I'd end up with 1 or 2 extra spots. So I'm going to just work my double crochet cluster just in the middle of this section, and I'll just work loosely so it can stretch. Instead of actually just skipping 1, I might be skipping more. And this will go ahead and fill it in so that way it's even around. And then again, normally we do like 1, 2, but here we're just going to slip stitch into basically where we started this row. And that will finish off our third row of this pattern. Again, you can stop here if you want, or you can follow along with me and do one more row. This row is similar to the one we just did, but it's a little different. So we're going to start by slip stitching along till we slip stitch in this space here. So I'm going to work a slip stitch in my next spot. And then a slip stitch in this chain space. Slip stitch in the top of this double crochet. And then slip stitch in this second chain space. Now when I get to this middle double crochet of the cluster, I'm going to work another cluster here. The cluster I'm going to work, I'm going to start with a double crochet in this spot right here, chain 1, double crochet in that same spot, chain 1, and do a third double crochet in that same spot. That's my little cluster, and now I'm going to do slip stitches down this side. So I'm going to work a slip stitch right in this chain space, a slip stitch in my next stitch from the previous row, a slip stitch in the next chain space, slip stitch in the top of this stitch right here. And that's the basic pattern. It's going to create this cute little bump on the top of our curves here. So I'm going to keep repeating this. I'm just going to work slip stitches along. So in the chain space, in the double crochet, and in that second chain space. And then in that very middle double crochet, I'm going to work our new pattern. So I'm going to start with a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet in the same spot, chain 1, and a third double crochet in the same spot. And then again, we're just going to slip stitch on down. So slip stitch in the next chain space, slip stitch in the next double crochet, slip stitch in the next chain space, and slip stitch in that next slip stitch from the previous row. And then you're ready to start back over. So again, I'm just going to do this all the way around. When I get back to the side, I will slip stitch in the front and join it, and then I will fasten off. I personally like this because it creates this cute border, because these slip stitches kind of go on the front and create that nice pattern, and then plus you have this fancy extra little bump up here. So I just finished crocheting that fourth row all the way around, I completed my last few slip stitches here, and then I pulled the loop through one more time to fasten it off. Going to cut it, pull this out, and just cinch this end up. And I'll obviously need to sew that in so it's not visible. Now that I've taken care of that, the last thing I'm going to do is just kind of get this all to lay flat. You may notice that it's kind of curling in a little bit, and yours may be doing the same thing. So what I first would recommend doing is kind of going around and just tugging on each of these and getting them to, stand up a little more. And I think it's super cute because once they're laying flat and not curled up, they look like little flowers. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to iron the whole thing again. And again, you can either use an actual iron or you can use a hair straightener like I am using. And when I do it with the hair straightener, I'm going to kind of pull outward on it. So that way they're nice and long and standing up. And now my project is all done. I'm so happy this project is finally done, no joke. I've probably been working on this for like 10 years, but finally it's done. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you enjoyed this project, let me know what you thought about it in a comment down below. I'll see you next week. Happy crafting! So if you're still watching, I guess I'll share this little tidbit with you. I like to think of myself as a fairly normal person, and yes, I have quirks, but everybody has their own little quirks. And one of the things I like about being somewhat normal, at least in my mind, is I'm constantly trying to break the stereotype that like, oh, if you crochet and do DIY stuff, that you fit the stereotype that, hey, we're just like everybody else. And then I realized that I was working on crocheting a border on a cross stitch on the weekend before I turned 21. So maybe I'm not totally normal.